Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, roll call. We'll start with Ann.
Ann Pierce.
Rebecca Johnson.
Karen Curry-Tono.
Carol Locke. Pam McLeod.
And Tim Broderick.
John MacArthur.
Heidi Duford.
Agenda review. Anything to add? Would you like to make a motion?
I make a motion we accept the agenda as presented.
Second. Any discussion? Good. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Approval of the minutes for January 10th and February 5th.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes from January 10th and February 5th as read.
I second.
Any discussion or corrections?
Yeah, I noticed a couple things. Just trying to. Just on my notes. So on January 10th, just some, I think it's just a typo that for the motion, the vote on adjournment, I wasn't here, so I didn't vote yes. Doesn't really matter, but.
Okay.
So that would be a point, yes.
And then on February 5th, on page, well, actually, on the vote for the agenda, it says it was unanimous, but I voted no on the amended agenda.
Okay.
And on page 2, line 5, it's just a typo. Object should be objections. And also on page 2, line 30, I think that number is probably incorrect. Either the number or the date. Alton is reported to have 20 cases since August 24th, which doesn't really make sense. I'm not sure what was said at the meeting at that point, but that sounds incorrect.
Okay.
I make a motion that we accept the minutes as amended.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right. Public input. We'll take public input on agenda items, and the time limit is 3 minutes for each person. Come on up.
Okay, I apologize, I just came in, I was getting gas, the whole thing, it's cold, all that, so do my best here to not fog up. So there was a study published in the American Journal of Infection Control in 2015, so well before COVID, called Face Touching, a frequent habit that has implications for hand hygiene. The study recognized that hands are considered a common
I'm really sorry to interrupt you. Can we have your name,
I'm
please?
sorry, Alicia O'Rourke.
Thank you.
So the study recognized that hands are considered a common transporter for the transmission of healthcare-associated infections and have been implicated in the transmission of respiratory infections. And we all know that hand washing and not touching your face are two key ways to prevent the spread of viruses. Yet this board wants to remove all mitigation measures, which includes mask, routine hand washing, and distance. Anyway, the study involved medical students who were observed during a lecture, and the observers, well, I'm gonna have to take these off for a second. Anyway, the study involved medical students who who are observed during a lecture, and the observers tally the amount of times these medical students touch their faces per hour on average, thereby increasing the potential spread of a staph infection or other common respiratory infections. That whole group had also recently completed a 4-hour infection control course that covered hand hygiene and transmission-based precautions. The study found that on average, these medical students touched their faces 23 times per hour, 44% involving contact with the mucous membrane, being the mouth, nose, eyes, or a combination, and 56% involved non-mucosal areas such as the chin, forehead, cheeks, and hair. So why am I mentioning this? Well, because when I spoke to this board last month, I couldn't help but notice how often the unmasked members touch their own faces. So I went back and I watched the first hour of the January 10th board meeting in the same manner as the study I referenced. To keep it simple, during the 53 minutes that the board could be observed on camera, I looked for rubbing the nose, rubbing the eyes, touching the mouth, licking fingers to turn pages, and then other face touching generally, like resting your cheek on your hands. Of the 3 people without masks, there were 121 total touches, but the majority involved mucus, majority, 55%, involved mucous membranes. And I'm sorry to call people out, but here's the breakdown. Ms. Pierce, you rubbed your nose 11 times, you touched your mouth twice, you licked your fingers 5 times to turn pages, and you touched your face 6 times otherwise. You also touched the woman next to you twice with the same hand that you used to rub your nose and lick your fingers. Ms. Johnson, you...
Point of order, Chairperson. I don't think it's appropriate for the public to call out board members specifically by name. I think there's a rule about that, actually, about calling out public names.
Can you just
Sure,
keep
the
going,
3
but just
people
don't
who were
use
here
names.
last week
Yeah.
know who they are.
Yeah.
There was another member who was without a mask, who is also without a mask today, rubbed their nose 6 times, rubbed their eyes twice, touched their mouth 10 times, touched the face generally 45 times, and 2 of the mouth touches were actually coughing into the hand twice. There was another person, the last person, who also did not have a mask on. They rubbed their nose 13 times, rubbed their eyes 2 times, touched their mouth 8 times, licked their fingers to turn pages 7 times, and touched their face generally otherwise 4 times. So why is this important? Well, because I did the same tally for those members at the table who wore masks during that same 1-hour window. We had 2 eyebrow scratches and 2 forehead touches. That's it. So for the other 5 people that were on camera, there were a total of 4 direct contacts with the face for that entire group, and none of them touched a single mucous membrane area. So forget about the efficacy of the specific types of masks for a moment, and simply consider your own behavior while wearing a mask or not. You're all educated professional adults. The study involved trained medical students. Yet the maskless members here touch their faces on average 40 times an hour. The medical students 23 times an hour. Yet the masked group less than 1 time per hour. So what can we extrapolate from this information? Well, what do we know about the demographics of the school? You're potentially
Alicia.
talking about removing all
Alicia.
mitigation. Yes,
Sorry, your time's up, so can you, I know you were interrupted.
I have
Can you,
literally.
just a tiny bit?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So I was going to say, what can we extrapolate from this information? What do we know about the demographics of this school? You're potentially talking about removing all mitigation measures for preschoolers, kindergartners, little ones who don't even understand about personal space or hygiene yet. And let's be honest, even with middle schoolers, they're not exactly the poster children for hygiene. So when you consider that those of you who did not wear a mask last month had over 40 times the amount of face touches as those who wore masks, what do you think the average face touch tally would be for a typical kindergartner with no mitigation measures in place? So when you think that you're ready to lift all mitigation measures, maybe you should consider how well you personally performed in this little behavioral study and reconsider. So my push would be for you to just leave the mitigation measures in place. Thank you.
Thank you for your input. And thank you for clarifying that licking your fingers was the turn pages.
Jason English. Just think about those kids in class that are touching their face with the face mask on and then putting it back on after they go to the bathroom, after they drop it on the floor, after they put it in their pockets. You know, what we need to understand is there are negative consequences that have been happening with the policies that are being put in on these kids. Since 2020, in 2020, there was 8,000 kids that left the New Hampshire school systems and they did not come back. We are watching it happen here where our math proficiency is down to 33%. You know, in 8th grade, that is unacceptable. It is not on our teachers. It is on how we are making these teachers teach our children and how we're making our kids learn. You know, these things, we need to understand that while you're trying to protect somebody from an invisible enemy, okay, it's already going around. It's already been around. I know some people missed me last month, but I had COVID. It was the 10th from the 24th that I stayed home and did my thing. But the funny thing is the only one that is vaccinated in my house actually did need an antibiotic because her stuff didn't go away. Me and my kids, we were fine. We didn't have any issues at all. But we do need to start understanding that mental illness is a problem, drug addiction is a problem, and what we're doing to these kids is we are just destroying them, okay? Depression is through the roof, anxiety is through the roof, behavioral problems in the classroom through the roof, okay? Kids are seeking any sort of attention, whether it's good, bad, or whether it's drugs, or whether it doesn't matter. Okay, what we're doing is we're harming these kids to protect who? Everybody can have a shot now. Everybody can have as many vaccines as you want, all right? You can wear a face mask if you want. That should be everybody's sole discretion, okay? We're going to continue this song and dance. We are about a month away from an election. I'm assuming we're going to maybe go optional because we want people to forget what we've been doing to our kids, okay? But I'm not going to forget. And there's a lot of parents out there that are not going to forget, okay? Because 4 to 5 months waiting periods for mental health experts, okay? That's how long it takes to get some help for your children nowadays for mental health. Some of these kids don't have 4 to 5 months, okay? We have to start paying attention to the other things that are not named COVID. How can we get our grades up? How can we give these teachers better tools and resources to help them, help our children succeed? We have to focus on academics. We have to focus on what is right for our budgets, okay? We shouldn't be spending more money than what we should be bringing in. We don't need seniors cutting pills in half just so that they can decide, do I cut a pill in half or do I pay my taxes? Do I go grocery shopping? Do I pay my taxes? If we don't start figuring out how to bring more children and more families into this school system, we are going to open up a whole can of big trouble, all right? Those are the things we
Jason,
need
your
to start
time is up.
focusing on.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Regular rotation of faces. Anna Ransom, I'm a parent of 3 kids in the school. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to talk with you today. I also appreciate the opportunity to provide my feedback as a parent on the survey. Couple things I'd like to point out. In the charts provided for tonight's meeting, when we look at the line chart, I would just ask the board to consider the fact that when we started the school year, we said that we would watch how things progressed. And the line chart says that things went really, really bad, really fast. They got really aggressive at the end of 2021, the beginning of this year. And though the line chart has dropped down, we're still in a worse off situation than we were when we first started the school year with the masking policies. So I think that should weigh into the decisions that get made tonight. Things aren't better. Things are better than they were when they were really bad. They're not better than they were when we started the school year, when we put these policies in place. So why would we back them off just yet? I also understand that I'm not the popular opinion in the room. So I guess equally as I spoke up at the beginning of the school year and advocated for masks, I also would say I understand there's a need to compromise because not everyone is of the same belief and same opinion. So I would ask the board to consider on the recommendations, when we talk about going back to mask is my decision, right? If I want to mask my kid, that's my choice. I respect that. The rotating lunchroom schedule or the full return to the cafeteria scares the life out of me for our family. And I respect that our family is not the same as every other family. When I presented the school's proposal to our doctors at the beginning of the year, they called that out as the one big risk for us. And the guidance that I was given was that my child would go to the BOT room. For those who don't know, the BOT room is known as that's the room where kids with behavioral problems go. Whether or not that's intended, that's the perception of the kids in the school. So please, please, please consider what the plan is for the kids who can't go to the lunchroom safely. The other thing that I thought was interesting was in the notes section, we talk about removing the tutoring services for students in isolation and that COVID-19 absences will be treated like any other absence due to illness. So what we're saying is we're taking away the precautionary measures and the safety nets that these kids have while also penalizing them for being out because they're sick. So we're increasing their opportunity for exposure, decreasing their safety net to make sure that they're staying on track. So please consider that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, my name's Aaron Hahn. I wasn't planning on speaking tonight. My intent was just to kind of observe. This is actually my first school board meeting. It's our first year in Alton, and so far so good. But I'd be remiss if I didn't come up to speak. We've been in this we're going on over 2 years. We're going to get to a point where we're going to have to learn to live with this. And also with the recent spike, which was actually in my eyes, as far as numbers go, that was an actual pandemic. The last 2 months, it seemed like everybody I know got COVID, whether they were vaccinated or not. My whole family got vaccinated, or got COVID a month ago, and I had a cold for 2 days. My kids, it was a cold. We haven't lost a child in New Hampshire from COVID, have we? So the risk reward, I think it doesn't make any sense at this point to continue on with this. Now, people who want masks, they have the choice to wear a mask if that makes them more comfortable or if they're afraid of touching their face. But I think it's time for parents' choice. It definitely is. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'll close public input. Thank you all for your input. We'll move on to informational items, starting with financials. So you have your reports in front of you. Do we have any questions on financials?
I have a couple of questions.
Are you surprised?
On page 3, glasses. Smaller than my computer screen. So on page 3, 55,630, which is special ed, tuition, private sources, high school. We're already quite over budget. I was just wondering, do we know if that's going to be a monthly expense for the rest of the year based on whatever the individual program is, or is that a specific isolated need?
There's a monthly cost.
Okay, so we should expect to be quite over that, so we may need to consider
Yep.
using the fund.
We'll wrap that up when we come to you at the end of the year with a picture of what the surplus or deficits look like in each function.
Okay,
And you have a stabilization fund for that if you need it.
right. And on page 10, I don't know if maybe this is the same answer from a previous meeting, but for buildings and grounds, for repairs and for equipment, Heidi, are there transfers that still need to be done?
Those are, right, it was the boiler project.
Right.
There were 3 projects that were encumbered from year-end funds. So yes, those are already taken into consideration. They're not really part of this year's budget. It's last year's money. It's just a holding place for it as we expend it.
Right, okay. So, but it's from the Buildings and Grounds Fund or from the grants, the warrants?
No, it's from your surplus from last year.
Surplus from last year, okay, so we're holding the space and then you're going to offset it?
There was money already to offset it. This is just a holding place.
Okay, so
It's
your
not coming-
revenue is offsetting
It's not coming
it.
out of this year's budget.
Okay. That's it, thanks.
Enrollment report. We go up a little bit?
Yeah, looks like we
Gosh.
gained 13 students.
Yeah, we're 13 students higher than this time last year. That's great. And it looks like a little bit higher than last month, although I can't remember the exact numbers too. Okay. That's excellent. School board report, deliberative session review. Do you want me to cover that, Tim? We held our deliberative session on February 5th. It's almost always the first Saturday in February. And I think we had, was it 21 residents in attendance, something along those lines? About half of those people were on a board of some kind. We're there in an official capacity. So we had maybe a dozen or less that were there from the public.
It was 12.
12? Okay. All of the motions, all of the articles passed without modification. So it was very smooth, went very well. We didn't have any members of the budget committee present, which I think is a sign of, I'll say support, but a sign of not being too worried about our budget, and everything was equally supported by the budget committee and the school board. So I thought it went very smoothly. And short, just at an hour, right? Yeah,
Good.
that's great. Thank you all for coming. And then we have District Administration Magazine, if anybody would like to take a look at that. Superintendent's report.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. There are, on the table, board members, and on the shelf over there for those members of the public attending, some handouts. I'm starting with the stapled packet. It's also on the screen, can be projected now for anyone watching on YouTube. There's another handout that's only here in the room that I'll talk about in a moment. So first, the big topic of the night, obviously, is where we stand with regards to coronavirus and protocols to limit the spread of COVID-19. I'm not going to belabor these graphs. You've been looking at them now for a long time. You see them every month. You can go check them yourselves on the DHHS website, although these particular graphs are ones that I create by pulling the data periodically, because DHHS won't give us a chart like this for Belknap County or for the town of Alton. We have to grab this data and hold on to it ourselves. So that's what this is. The new case rate is still over the level that the CDC, DHHS considers substantial, which is only 100 new cases per 100,000 in population. We were at 675 on February 11th. There has not been new data uploaded since February 11th. I won't take time to complain about DHHS tonight. I've done that enough. Belknap County right below that, these are active cases. This is not the infection rate. This is exactly the way I've been reporting this data to you previously. And then we have the town of Alton active cases as reported by DHHS, were 9 as of the last report. on the bulleted information here, and board members, the packet in front of you has a couple of differences from the one that was emailed out yesterday, but when we get to those, I'll try to highlight what they are. This is not one of them. DHHS has withdrawn its guidance for schools. It originally had issued guidance for schools and childcare centers over the summer. That was amended during October, and it has been changed a couple of other times along the way without necessarily notification to us, but we've kind of figured it out by realizing that some of the rules had changed. Those documents are completely gone now. They were 25 or 30 pages long. We now have 3 pages of guidance. We included it yesterday in what we sent out to members of the board. It's easy to get to on the DHHS website. DHHS is no longer conducting contact tracing in schools, and they're not asking us, to do any contact tracing in schools. Instead, they are asking schools to voluntarily report once a week a total number of cases. That number for us this week appears to be either 3 or 4, but DHHS also cut down the isolation time for active cases from 10 days to 5 days about a month and a half ago, so the number changes much faster than it was in the fall. The new definition of clusters and outbreaks are 3 or more cases within a cohort is now considered a cluster. At one time that was 10%. An outbreak is 2 or more unrelated clusters within a school. That's changed a number of times. That could be 6 cases here. I will remind you that you most recently adopted a threshold of 5% of the number of the total number of people in the school on a given day. I think that's 26 was where that landed. And that was where, and it did happen, right? It happened days after that meeting. That was the trigger for me to institute a 2-week face covering requirement, which did happen. And then as long as the number of cases had declined below 5%, that would last 2 weeks and that's it. It would only be extended if the number of cases stayed high. That didn't happen. The case count did decline. So we had a 2-week face covering requirement, and that was that. The CDC and AAP have not changed their guidance since last summer. They still recommend universal face covering in schools nationwide. In January, you saw the results of that parent, guardian, and staff surveys, I should say, a month ago. And at that time, about 1/3 of our students and staff reported that they had either tested positive or believed they had had COVID-19 this year. We, in spite of all of our school nurses' contact tracing efforts this year, there are very few cases, there are some, but there are very few cases where we suspect transmission within the school. It is far, far more common, or so this is the experience at least of our 3 school nurses, and I'm speaking for all 3 of them, not just our nurse here at Alton Central School. It is far more common that our students and staff appear to be contracting COVID-19 when they do somewhere else. Is it possible to transmit a virus in a school? Of course it is. It's possible to transmit a virus anywhere. We do not have overwhelming evidence of transmission within the schools. We may be following the trend we saw last year. There was a bump last year between February vacation and April vacation, and then after April vacation there was a decline to the end of the year. I've given you an overview. This is page 3 of the status of other schools in the Lakes region as of last Wednesday. Some of these have changed since Wednesday. Gilmanton has changed this to face coverings optional. Newfound, I believe, as of last night, they had a board meeting, I think it was Newfound, and went to face coverings optional. And I know from the same meeting that resulted in this chart existing from talking to the other superintendents that the conversation happening here tonight is happening throughout the region at whenever the next scheduled board meetings happen to be. On the next page, page 4, I've given you a summary of what's happened in some other states where there were statewide face covering requirements. There isn't one, as you know, here in New Hampshire. I'm not going to read that page to you. On page 5, I've given you a comparison where the questions were the same or very similar to the survey data we received back from parents and guardians in January versus just over this past weekend, the number of parents or the percentage of those responding, and there were far fewer respondents this time. We had 364 responses, and off the top of my head, I don't recall, but it was a lot more. It was well over 500 when we did this in January. So where 43% of parents and guardians a month ago expressed a preference that the school make all face coverings optional, that number is now 65%, where just under a third, 30% of parents suggested keeping the rule we had in effect at the time, which was the partial requirement. That number is now 24%. And while 19% of those responding to the survey a month ago would have preferred a universal face covering requirement in the school a month ago, that number is now 10%. Clearly, there's still some division here, but you can see how the sentiment has shifted. Likewise, there are far more parents responding that the sneeze guards should or can be removed, and there's a little less, at least statistically speaking, enthusiasm for a return to a regular lunch schedule, but that's one of the reasons why the principal, and I know we talked about this at more than one meeting, but we have in fact created a plan to talk about tonight that he could implement if you want to. So on page 6, I've given you some recommendations, and they're not as clean as, oh, just do this. There are some options here, but you're the board. The first one is to eliminate on some schedule the indoor face covering requirement. As you know, you can do what you choose. You could take this action immediately. You could put it into effect next Monday, or you could wait until after the upcoming vacation, which would be Monday, March 7th. Of course, you could choose not to do this at all, but this is my recommendation that you consider those 3 options. Second, give us February vacation, please, to have our maintenance and custodial staff remove the plexiglass. Guards, it's going to take some time, and that would be an easy time for us to get that done. And then I'll let John talk a little bit, if he will, please, about the schedule he's developed for use of the cafeteria. It incorporates, and I don't want to get into the details because I'll get them wrong, so we'll let him do that, but it rotates cohort levels, grade level groups, and also allows an opt-out for parents of students, whether they're at higher risk if they do contract coronavirus, or simply for any other. We won't ask why, if parents want to opt out of that. So John, do you want to just give sort of an overview, please? Thank you.
So really, if this would be if we were to remove mitigation measures in the CAF, which would mean spacing and the sneeze guards. If that was the case, parents would submit a permission slip for their child that would designate either CAF or classroom. And we would pretty much go to the schedule we were going to do before the spacing with the sneeze guards was sort of shut down by DHHS, CDC, whichever one it was, which basically nixed that, which is kind of why we've been in the predicament with the CAF. So we could go back to the schedule we had. We have the staffing to do it. But there would be, the permission slip would say, so students that the parents choose for them to stay 6 feet apart, forward facing, the classrooms like they have been all year can still happen. And those that want to go into a regular CAF can happen. The lunches would still follow the normal schedule. So like our K2 lunch is 12:15 to 12:40. Our 3 to 5 lunch, 11:05 to 11:30, and 6 to 8 is 11:40 to 12:05. We have 10 minutes in between each ones for cleaning, like we've had all year long. So we can utilize our original AB lunch rotation that we had in the slight changes. There would be no need for a rotating schedule like we've been talking about because the decision's been made by the parents, which means the parents are choosing for their kid to be in the CAF or the classrooms. So that it wouldn't rotate. There's no reason to rotate. So what that would mean is, for our K2 kids, we have 127 students, grades 3 to 4, 128, 6 through 8 is 136. Pre-K does not eat lunch in our building. And our capacity in the CAF right now, if we used every single seat in there, is 144. So all of which fit because, well, we figured that out way back, as far as how many before COVID. But what this would mean is, so what do we do with the students and how are we going to do this with staff? Well, if we're following the data that we've gotten from the most recent surveys, it wouldn't need to be all the classrooms anymore, which means we would be able to put, the students in those grades in the largest classrooms, 6 feet apart, at the desk, just like this has been going on all year. The thing is, we would be putting them, within their cohort groups, in a classroom, and then those staff members in the classrooms that aren't full of kids would be in the CAF. So it all, in theory, works if that's the case, and we are, and that is the choice that's made tonight to give, the parent choice in where their students go. And it follows the data that we have recently gotten. It works.
Thanks, John. So the reason for this is because they're, the parent responses are a little less overwhelming about use of the cafeteria. So I asked John to work on a way to offer both. So it would be a work in progress. It would probably be ideal for us to be able to communicate with parents not only for the next few days, but also next week and then start after vacation. My hope would be if we continue to see improvements in the public health situation, that this is something maybe we offer from March 7th through leaving for April vacation, and then maybe it's not necessary after that. But of course, you'll meet again before then, and there's time to think that through. A few notes. And again, you are the board and can do what you choose. We can't do anything about our buses, so actually you can't do anything you choose, but you can do almost anything you choose. I recommend that you still follow DHHS guidance for isolation and quarantine when somebody gets sick, because I don't know what else you would do. As you know, that guidance has changed, but assuming it stays where it is, we know. If it does change, we would adopt those changes as soon as they come from DHHS, as we've been doing all year. So because we've been following that guidance on quarantine and isolation, anytime DHHS has made a change and the nurses have wanted to know, what do I do? I've said, follow the guidance. The board said, follow DHHS guidance, so we do. If we should experience an increase in cases, and we surpass that number based on 5% that you discussed at your last meeting, I would do the same thing. If we had 26 cases in the school, I would institute a 2-week face covering requirement and watch that number. If it comes down under 5%, we'd eliminate that requirement, and if it doesn't, I'd extend it 1 week at a time. But again, in a face coverings optional scenario, face coverings are an option. So nobody's not able to wear one anytime they want. So on tutoring services, we can do whatever you choose. As our numbers are low, use of the service is low, and we're burning ESSER money. So it's up to you. At some point, at one time, if a student was out with COVID-19, that student was out for 10 days. Now that student is out for 5 days. And those are calendar days. So often it's not even 5 days absence from school. So the impact is half what it once was. The need for quarantine is far less than it was, again, because case counts are down. And again, under older guidance in the fall, we had people quarantining for 20 days. That doesn't exist anymore. So our needs are less, case counts are less, but we're still spending the same amount on the service. It is up to you. Providing masks is no problem, and I just think it's pretty logical that we continue to do it for those who wish to have them. And as we receive public health information from the Winnipesaukee Region Public Health Network and from the Department of Health and Human Services, our nurse and principal can continue to share those things with our community. Those are my recommendations. I'm going to guess you want me to stop.
Yeah, I think let's move forward on this and take action, and then we can move on to everything
I
else.
just have a couple questions.
Yeah, yeah,
Sorry.
I do too.
You do too? Okay. So with the tutoring service, you're saying we have a formal tutoring service that we pay for.
We do.
So if children are absent on a normal basis, if it wasn't COVID, teachers give them work to do at home? Is that how it works, Joe?
Yep.
So that type of policy will continue. It's not like they're gonna be left without anything to do, per se, right? People can pick up work. I just wanna clarify that so that people don't think we're leaving them at home without anything
No,
support.
I think it's a good question. And prior to, far be it from me to argue that there have been silver linings to the pandemic, because I don't have a lot of good things to say these days. Every single teacher in all of our schools has an electronic classroom and is using it. That was not true 2 years ago in any of our schools. Some teachers were using electronic tools in their classrooms, but now everybody does. So at one time, a student who was, you know, when I think I've talked to you before about my daughter Olivia had chicken pox and missed a bunch of school, and we were getting packets, right? Picking up packets in folders at the school, and she would go through and do the stuff, and we'd take them back. Everything's in Google Classroom now, and I would venture, your results, I'll look at the camera, your results may vary, but I would venture that if my child were out for 5 days of school and was struggling with something, and I emailed Mr. Papasino to help with my 5th grader, I bet he'd reply. And I bet I could get some help from Mr. Papasino.
So really what you'd be eliminating is formal tutoring service, as opposed to teachers helping children.
Yeah,
is what-
the purpose of the service was it's available during school hours on a schedule with a high number of students missing school so that Mr. Papasino would have a harder time keeping up with
Right.
6 or 7 kids who are all out of his class for 15 days.
That's just.
That's a pretty heavy lift when he's also teaching every day full-time. That's less reasonable. So the service served a role. Those kids were still doing the work in his, sorry to single you out, Derek, but those students were still doing the work in his Google Classroom. So they were still doing the same work as their classmates. Ideally, when they came back, they hadn't missed a beat. I would guess they might have missed a beat or two, but not hopefully too many. So that was the purpose, and I think hopefully that sort of explains
Sure.
what it would look like now.
Do you consider it to be successful effort, the tutoring?
Of course,
It's not the same as being in a classroom, obviously, but,
Nothing beats a class.
it
right.
Doesn't
It help?
sound like it's been widely utilized
I mean,
lately, or?
kids have shown up.
But not a resounding success is what I'm sort of
I've-
reading between the lines.
I'm not there, I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what we would measure it against,
Okay,
you know?
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
What do we compare it to?
Right.
I know it's not public info, but I'm a parent who was exposed to it. It's not great.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anna.
And if Jason and I agree, like, we should probably go buy a beer.
Oh, you both, okay.
I do appreciate you working on the cafeteria issue, because I think there are children who cannot be in the cafeteria. The other question I have is, in the classrooms, will the desks still remain 6 feet apart?
That would,
Would there be
Yeah.
any reason not to?
There's no reason to change our classrooms, everybody
Okay.
fits in them the way they are.
So the,
We didn't really,
during partial masking, they were 6 feet apart anyway, without masks, so I just wanted to clarify that piece too.
I mean, that's a really good point, and that would be something that I think we would need the clarification. I would say definitely for the classrooms, if this was to be, you know, if what I just read was to be chosen, those classrooms that are designated for lunchrooms, there's no option. We would have to keep them 6 feet.
I'm just talking about regular classrooms, period. If they're already 6 feet apart, we're not going to change that, are we? Again, just to clarify for parents.
If we remove all mitigation, then
no, I mean, I wouldn't recommend that we tell teachers, hey, push all your desks
All right,
together.
thank
mean,
you. I just
doesn't
want to make
seem
sure that that's
necessary.
clear also. But I do appreciate you working on the cafeteria issue, because I do think that's one of the biggest problems with especially for our medically fragile children. We have that responsibility to keep them safe. So, sorry, Carol, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was wondering, in January, we surveyed staff.
Yep.
With the same question, I was wondering if we have results. If we
Did.
provide the same.
Yes, and staff, so the parent number was, sorry, now I'm shuffling papers, 65% preferred that face coverings become optional. 60% of staff today gave that same response.
Thank you.
The sheet here with handwriting all over it is because I just kind of threw it together today. This was in response to a question I received via email to chart the number of positive cases in the school by week. And that's what the top chart does. So the week of, it goes Monday through Sunday, September 7th through 12th, there were 3 cases. Does that make sense? I won't read the rest of it to you, but that's how it works.
Yeah, I think I asked a question, and, you know, I think the purpose of my question was to see what periods we were partial masking and full masking, and when the outbreaks were, to compare it to the cases. So I don't see that on here.
I have to look up the dates.
You know, because I recall, you know, we had a pretty set pattern where we were partial masking. If we had cases go up or had an outbreak, we went to full masking, cases went way down. And then after a certain period of time, we would go back to partial masking, cases go up, and you can kind of see that by this chart where it kind of yo-yoed, which did in fact show that when we were full masking, cases in the school did go down. That was pretty apparent from the numbers we saw after full masking periods. So that's what I was hoping to see on the graph, to make sure I was correct about that. Or
The
to see if I
problem with
was
that
wrong.
is it's catch-22, because for 2 weeks they recovered, so it's hard to tell. I have the same feeling sometimes. If we fully mask, yes, our cases go down. But on the flip side, we had a lot of cases, we had fully masked, and they've recovered now. So
I think of it as correlation but not causation, because it's more about what's happening in the environment, the community around us.
So the reason I aligned or attempted to align, which is why they're different sizes and those lines are drawn down them. So there's the number of active cases in the town and the number of active cases in the county. And if you just look at the shapes of the graphs, they're similar. So when the school, and I think it's happened twice here since September, has shifted to a universal indoor face covering requirement, we didn't do that at the town-wide or county level, and the
Right,
data
so-
plot's kind of the same.
So clearly, even if it is correct that we don't have or haven't shown specific transmission within the school, clearly what's going on in the environment around us in town and on the county level affects the rates in the school. Which is another reason why I think, you know, and I've proposed all along, that we look at trends and we look at the environment around us, not purely the number in Alton or the number in school, because we should be proactive, not just reacting to clusters or outbreaks. So I appreciate you making that graph. It's helpful, because I don't think we've had that information all together in one place about the cases in the school. And, you know, I think obviously we've just passed a huge surge, which was off the charts. They had to make the whole graph bigger. When you look at what the graph is for New Hampshire in total, you know, thankfully we're past that, but I think there are some points we should consider before we make a decision of what to do within the next couple weeks.
Excuse me, Karen, can
Yeah.
I ask for any more questions on Tim's presentation and then ask for a motion so that we can then get into the discussion.
Actually, I'd like to have a discussion before a motion's made. I think that's what we typically do. You know, we all discuss, and then we make a motion. Someone makes a motion based on our discussion, and then if there's further discussion on the specifics of the motion, that's what we typically do in meetings.
That's fine, I just want to make sure that we keep it moving along.
Yeah.
I don't think it,
Do we? I don't really remember what we've done.
Typically, we don't need a motion on the table for the board to have a discussion. A lot of times, we have to have a discussion to get to the point where we're making a motion.
well, I wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to get their questions out
Okay, sure.
before we start.
I have no questions based
Nothing?
on this
Okay.
information.
I just have one more question. So when you talk about getting rid of all the mitigation, you really are only talking about plexiglass and masks, correct?
Yeah,
You're still
so-
having kids sanitize and wash hands, I'm assuming.
Right.
Right, so I would, thank
Just
you
to
for asking
clarify
that
for-
question, because I would clarify, if you look at page 6, there are specific things listed here.
Right,
If we were eliminating all mitigation, then none of these notes would be here at the bottom.
exactly. I
About
just-
providing face coverings and sharing information from public health agencies and,
Sure. I
Right.
just wanted to make sure that was also stated, because I don't want people to think we're not having children
I don't think it-
sanitize, for
yeah.
goodness sake.
All right, we're not gonna ask people not to wash hands.
yeah, I don't think anyone intends for it to be against the rules here for people to
Exactly.
wash their hands or wear face coverings.
And we still have sanitizers outside every
Everywhere.
classroom, that's all
We do.
still available.
That was the only other question I had.
No.
I wanted to make
Okay.
sure when we
Temperature
talk about
scanners.
mitigation, we're not just saying everything's being eliminated, because that would be silly. We all keep, I use hand sanitizer all the time.
Okay, Karen, finish up your.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to bring up some points to consider because, you know, we've just been through this big surge, but if we look at the numbers, at the 7-day average for last week, we're still nearly 2 times what the 7-day average was in September. So while we've had a relative decline, which is a huge relief, we haven't had a baseline decline. So we're really at that same level of transmission, community transmission that we've been at while we've been partial masking, which, you know, has been successful to a certain point, but we've still had outbreaks, still had cases, still had numbers going up. And also, another thing I had asked the superintendent to try to get together for this meeting is some idea of the loss of learning that we're seeing. Because other than, you know, a case number, if a child has quarantine or is even out for the 5 days, there's a certain amount of learning loss that we're going through based on having a higher level of transmission within the community. So that's why I still think it's important to use mitigation measures to try to limit transmission so that we are not having as high of a loss of learning due to quarantining, whether it's for contacts or for actual cases. Also, you know, nobody wants a resurgence, and I think my concern is just that we not move too fast. We've got 1 more week after this week before vacation. And I also respect the survey results from parents that everybody wants to get away from masking. My suggestion would be that we keep our current partial masking up until vacation and perhaps the week after. And then we take a serious look at pool testing, because if we can't, DHS has stated clearly that the numbers are undercounted right now because of home tests. So the numbers we're seeing even in the last couple of weeks here for Alton cases are undercounted according to DHHS. So we can't really rely on those numbers the same way that we have in the past. So we need to shift what we're looking at for data points. And what we really need to look at is what's coming in the door, because that's what matters. So I would suggest we take a hard look at pool testing, which has been successful other places even when numbers were much higher and before vaccination, as a way just to get an idea randomly of what level of transmission or infection we have with kids who are actually coming into the school. And then base our mitigation levels on that information as guidance. That's all I had.
All right. Would anybody like to make a motion?
Yes, I'll speak after them. I make a motion that, we implement making masks optional, and that beginning on Monday, whatever that date is, I'm sorry.
February 21.
Monday, the March 7th, or
February.
Monday, the return after vacation?
Next Monday?
Or
Yeah.
Monday, the
The
21st?
21st.
Okay.
So I make a motion, mask optional beginning Monday, February 21st.
Second it.
Okay, further discussion?
I'd like to see us wait until after vacation, only because that gives them time to communicate with parents, get those permission slips out, get the information out so parents know what they're dealing with. And then when they come back from vacation, it's like everything starts at the same time. That's how I see it. So, I could support doing it starting March 7th, but I feel like that gives the school time to get out of those ducks in a row. It's just another week. And then, obviously, pool testing, I'm not even clear what that means, so truthfully.
I am
It's not part of the
definitely not
motion,
in
Yeah,
favor
so-
of that,
But
so-
anyway, so I just feel like if we could do March 7th, it would be clear cut, everything done, they get the stuff, the permission slips out, everything could start at the same time. That's how I see it.
May I suggest that we wait on the lunch until after vacation, but I don't think the change in masking will be a huge disruption to the school. I think I guess I would look to John to see how he feels, but, I mean, we even had the option of tomorrow on the table, so I don't think that would be here if you thought that would be super disruptive.
I mean, requiring,
Making mass
The-
optional.
the, parent permission slip for the CAF, it would be really, really tight to get that, in place for Monday.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think the lunchroom, maybe
Right.
we wait until after vacation, but go ahead and do the masks,
Next month.
next
the
Monday.
21st.
Start that next Monday.
Right, that'll give us 3 days.
Yeah, 'cause
Zip
I-
an email out to parents, they're well aware, they've taken the survey, they know
If
what's
that
going
did
on.
happen, that would be it would be, I'm sure, a blast, and then another blast reminder in my Sunday message that goes out, at 5 on Sundays too, so, I mean, that would be enough time that people would know, it wouldn't be a surprise.
Okay.
And we would also wait for the plexiglass for after vacation to give the custodial staff.
Yeah, they need that time
I
Right,
too.
they need
Yeah.
that time, so I mean,
Yeah.
that's
We just
reasonable.
need that time. It
Right,
also allows
that's-
us to allow a parent to say, I would rather you leave one
Yep.
on my child's desk, which we would certainly do.
Right.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay. So the motion is covering masking. I don't know if you want to modify it to include the lunchroom.
Correct, so we're gonna allow lunch in the lunchroom for those who want it, those who wanna opt out can opt out, and that will begin the Monday when we return from,
March 7th.
Great,
Vacation,
correct.
Monday, March 7th.
and again, just to be clear, people can wear masks all they want, it's their
Optional
option.
and available.
I just wanna add that I feel like we keep moving the goalpost, so it's time to stop moving the goalpost and move forward. And just to touch on Karen, you know, comparing numbers from September to now, but, I mean, we also need, a month ago, January 15th, our 7-day average for cases was 37 cases. As of February 10th, it was 531, so we've definitely declined in cases.
I don't know, my view is if you go from incredibly horrible to bad, that's not necessarily good. That's my view of it.
I've been really impressed with how things have worked at the high school this year, where it's been optional and it's been surprising. I can't imagine that the rate of vaccination is too much different between the elementary school and the high school. I don't know the reasons for that, but I think it's worth a try.
I think the ventilation in the high school is much better than it is in this building.
And I have a lot of faith in the superintendent. If things get worse, he can.
That was gonna
Make a
be my
call.
point, is that
Yeah.
I feel like Tim has done, we've put our faith in Tim, he's done a great job of deciding when to move to masks, and
So, Tim, you're on board with February 21st?
Yep.
Okay,
Okay.
that's what I want to know.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay. 4-1. Tutoring, I think we need to address
If you want.
that.
You can keep it if you want to keep it.
I'm hearing it feels lukewarm, very lukewarm to me.
Can you do
Yeah.
some sort of study to see comparatively who's using it compared?
Yeah, we get data reports every week from the company that tells us who's logging on. It doesn't tell us what benefit they are or are not yielding
So they're not interacting
from using the
with tutor?
service. And they interact with the tutor, but that would require more of a qualitative thing where we talk to the tutor. We get a report, it tells us
That
these
they logged
students
on.
at these times spent this much time connected. We'll assume the best and assume they're all getting a lot out of that, but then I talk to some parents who say, yeah, my kid did that, but we weren't thrilled. You know, it was really a response to parent demand, right? Back when there were a lot of students having to isolate and quarantine, it was really a response to what can we do to try to help kids navigate Google Classroom and get the work done and get help if they need it.
Can you do it again if you need to?
Yeah, we can turn it back on anytime
Okay,
we
it's
want.
just a monthly, okay,
Because I feel like the teachers are the best resource,
yeah.
and, you know, they know the content, they know their kids, and I think they're super helpful and very responsive. And
If we have an outbreak, maybe you need to reconsider, but I agree. I mean, the teachers are really gonna be working with the kids. I'm fine with it as long as the teachers are working.
And if
It's
they
like
see
any
a
other
need,
absence.
I would hope that they would speak up and say,
Right.
look, I'm overwhelmed with kids. I mean,
Perhaps a motion to give the administration the authority to decide what to do with that?
That's a great idea. I make a motion that we give the administration the authority to decide if we need the tutoring service.
I'll second.
Okay. Further discussion? No? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, any opposed? Okay. As far as pool testing, I think, I'd ask Tim to just research that and maybe bring it back to us, if it's something he's interested in doing. I will say we're doing pool testing in Concord at our elementary schools for the last couple of weeks. We just started at the elementary schools. The results are very, very low. I don't know that they're zero, but oftentimes I see emails that say they're zero for the whole week, in the schools, so.
I have a lot of concerns about pool testing. It just feels very invasive.
Well,
to
you
me.
do have to get parent permission to
Yeah.
participate in it,
I
yeah,
just really,
yeah.
Yes,
So
how do
I'm-
they pool test?
I am, yep, and I can tell you, so I am more than happy to do some research. I'll talk to folks at some schools that have been doing it in New Hampshire. It is free to us if we choose to do it. It does require an opt-in. I'll go out on a limb and predict that we would get maybe 50% of our students opting in, so there's a question there about how valuable is it? And that's legitimate, right? If we're trying to identify cases and we're only testing half the population, what does that really do for us? It takes some time, it interrupts instructional time. But it works, and it works better than just giving everyone a test, meaning it's less time consuming and less costly than just giving everybody tests. The way it works is, without being too graphic, samples are collected from an entire group, usually by classroom, and then those samples are mixed together as one test. If that test comes back positive, it means somebody in that group was positive, and now they all take an individual test.
Okay.
But again, it's an opt-in kind of a thing, so now we're talking about a classroom with maybe 15 students in it where 9 of them are in the pool test. A positive's still a positive, so you're getting some information, but it would be incorrect to feel reassured that we're finding every room where there's a positive if not everyone has opted into pool testing. So just things to think about. I'll do some research. I'll talk to some folks in districts where it's being done.
And
Yeah,
it
it's
is, it is a lot of coordination on the administration's part.
April.
Yeah, and just to piggyback off that, a report did come out, published by the CDC stating that, the study showed that asymptomatic people are likely not spreading COVID. So I think it's just
I saw that too.
it's just an exercise that we don't need to do.
Okay. Anything else on COVID, or can we move along? All right. Go ahead, Tim. Summer
Yeah.
enrichment planning.
I'm not that lucky. So we started last week. So I wasn't here for the conversations that led to it, but I understand from working with administrators and teachers in the school that the board was very interested in some alternative approaches to summer school last year. And there's a big mural on one of the walls that's some of the evidence of that, of an effort to do that. Summer school was larger than typically here at Alton last year. Was sorry to put you on the spot.
Yeah,
Roughly how many
50.
kids? 50, 60 kids. So this is the kind of thing I'm trying to avoid as your shared superintendent, but at another elementary school, we experimented with some new summer enrichment programs and had almost 200 kids participate. So we all got together last week and started some joint planning. We've been speaking with the folks who run the TL Storer Scout Reservation, which is located partially in Barnstead, part in Pittsfield, and part in Stratford. They've got about 1,000 acres, 2 or 3 ponds, a bunch of different camps, and one of the things that folks seem pretty excited about working on is some nature-based outdoor summer enrichment programs. That doesn't mean that they're not academic, it just means that the academics are integrated into some experience in the real world. And some programs don't have to be academic. Some programs can be about team building and just getting outside and having
I
some
would
fun.
just like to say, I am all in for it. I think that a lot of the social emotional concerns that we all currently have, that parents have, I think a really great way to address some of those is by actually having the kids active together outside. And
I agree.
I just think
And-
that's a big healing point for kids. We don't need guest speakers, we don't need lectures, we need them to be kids. And
If you go back many years, we did have a much bigger summer program than we do now. Derek was in charge of some of it years ago, and I remember our New Hampshire Teacher of the Year building guard boxes, and that was math. It was hands-on math
Yeah.
and measurement and experiment, and it was just really amazing. And then growing the food, in the boxes, and
real life math.
just a huge fan of that. And
Me too.
love the fact that we have collaboration between the districts. That's what shared services is all about, right there.
I agree.
So one of the things that happened last summer that I was really happy about was we had a group of kids with a teacher building model rockets and flying them on the last day. And without anybody planning a math lesson, they figured out what vectors are and started thinking about wind speed, because the teacher simply asked, how are you gonna get them to land on the X? And kids had to solve a real world problem. That's really what education should look like. I know we all believe that.
I'd love to see some of the high school students possibly get involved as well.
So we piloted some things at the high school last year as well, and actually all 3 schools attended this kickoff meeting that we had last week. At the high school, one of the groups did an Appalachian Mountain Club trip, stayed at the Highland Center, did some of their training, and then ultimately did an overnight backpacking, hiking trip. We had a group build a stained glass sculpture, which it's a math program.
Right.
We had 12 kids last summer come in and do that at the high school. So it was a smaller scale. It's one thing to get a couple hundred elementary school aged children for a few days a week during July because mom or dad might think that's a really good idea because I can go do the grocery shopping or whatever. Teenagers, it's probably not realistic to get as much participation.
Right.
But
Well,
we're
still,
definitely
it's-
looking
it's
to
nice
expand
when
it.
they,
Yeah.
You could
or
also
even
look
some-
at community service hours.
Right, or even
So
some
they could be
middle
We don't
helping with
require
the
them
other.
anymore.
middle
I think.
school
Thought
kids.
They're back to requiring.
We'll talk about it next week.
the upper grades or, you know, anything
Yeah.
like that. Just,
So-
I mean, kids look
Yeah.
up to kids.
So,
you know.
so the other thing about the amount of participation we had last year versus what I think it's realistic to expect is when you start talking about, we're gonna try something new and it's gonna kind of look like this, it's really hard for people to think, oh, that sounds great, I'm going to do that. Now we have people running around talking about, we did this and we enjoyed it, and this is what was good about it. So I expect a lot more participation because we are required to use 20% of the ESSER 3 funds at every school to evaluate and address learning loss due to the pandemic. We can leverage some of those funds for these programs. That means we can provide transportation for summer programs for students who do or do not have IEPs. Normally, we wouldn't be able to very easily do that without adding money to the budget. For these programs, we can. We can provide food, if that makes sense. We have a lot of flexibility with these programs, and I think we intend to take advantage of that.
Sounds great.
That's great.
Alton does not offer a lot for kids in the summer, and I remember the days when my kids were small, and it was very hard. I work full-time to, you know, to find things for them to do, so this kind of enrichment, I think, is really great.
Yeah, I agree, and anything we can do with transportation and food for all kids, not just those in need, but so that it's kind of an equal playing field would be,
So another one of the things that I appreciated about what the folks did in these pilot programs last year was that we have certain obligations to some of our students with IEPs to provide extended school year services. Then we layer in these other enrichment programs, and there's no difference.
Right.
So it was not possible last summer to figure out which kids are here in an extended school year program because they have an IEP and a diagnosed learning disability versus which kids decided it would be fun to come build model rockets. No, they all decided it would be fun to build model rockets because it is fun to build model rockets. And by the way, you learn some math and some other things along the way. I think it's one of the best parts, actually, and why I'm excited about doing this. This is not only for this year. We have ESSER funding for the next 3 summers.
that's
Nice,
awesome.
nice.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah,
need a
these all
motion
sound-
on this?
Not really.
No, okay.
These all sound like great ideas in the summer, but I also wonder if we could transition what we learned there into our normal classroom days, and really get kids outside more. And, you know, we've really, over the past several years, when we could focus on it, we're moving towards project-based learning more, and moving towards enrichment in the classroom. And to use some of what we're talking about here in our everyday education would be great.
Yeah, I agree with that, yeah. Tim does too, I know he does.
I'm afraid if I start, it won't stop.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll
All right.
talk more.
So we don't need a motion on that.
I don't.
Strategic planning?
And then, again, I actually talked about this briefly at your last meeting, but it is time. We have other work we should be doing. We've been preoccupied for good reasons for the last couple of years, but there are real issues that we need to deal with. And you hired me to lead in these areas. So we combined services at the central office. The boards decided to do that for reasons, right? It's not about, well, we'll pay one superintendent instead of 3. Yes, that's good, right? And there are some savings in the central office, but it's more than that, right? It should be also about integrating curriculum data and assessment plans from kindergarten through high school. That does not exist, right? We don't have it. Culture, discipline, and community connections. I'm just reading my bullets here. You know, part of strategic planning is always talking about school culture, the culture among the kids, the culture among the adults, and the cultures between the adults and the kids. But I think that coming out of the pandemic, there's far more to it than that. I think it's about the schools as institutions that serve the communities and how we connect with the communities. I think there's a lot of work to do there. The capital plan for this school was last updated in June of 2019. We've started working on a more robust capital plan, 5-year capital plan for ACS. So I'm looking at, my old practice in the past has been to do capital planning first in the fall before operating budgets. But I was in a world where operating budget development came a little later. Here, we start operating budgets so early that I've realized this year, I think we need to do our capital plans in the spring. And that'll be at all 3 schools. So I'm looking to bring you a draft 5-year capital plan by June. And then whatever components of that get incorporated into the next year's budget, we'll just be able to carry them over. Or onto the warrant, depending, as the case may be. And then I just want to drop this for now so that you know it's on my mind. I was a coach when I was a teacher, and I think that all sorts of extracurricular activities are really important for kids. We have very low participation in extracurricular activities in general. I'm talking about sports and other activities. And I think that's a shame. I don't think that's good for communities. I don't think it's good for kids. And I think that, I know it might be a little early right now, but 2 towns that feed the same high school, some kind of, again, if we think that curriculum data and assessment when it comes to academic learning should be integrated K through 12, we should really be looking at athletic development in the same way. If one town has a development program in a particular sport, I'll choose basketball, but the other one doesn't, guess what happens when you get to high school? There's an imbalance and a mismatch, and it doesn't work out very well. We should at least start thinking about this strategically, and I want to include that in our strategic planning. That I intend to begin on here. I'm expecting things to continue to get better with regards to everything else we've been talking about. And I want to get back to the business of running schools. So I'm looking at assembling strategic planning committees in the next 6 or 8 weeks and getting to work.
Can
So
I,
you
I'm, go ahead.
Oh, you said extracurricular, so when you're talking about a system-wide athletic development strategic plan, are you including extracurricular? I mean, the arts for
I promise.
theater and
Yes.
drama
Yes,
and other
absolutely,
arts
Karen.
and science?
Sorry about that.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
I've been working with Concord's strategic plan this year, but I just wanted to emphasize, I really hope we have good, strong focus groups with students as part of this. And not just the good students or the students who always volunteer to do something, but a good balance of kids from across different academic levels, athletics, extracurricular, different.
Yep. Yeah,
types
so
of
I'll give you sort of an outline and a roadmap at your next meetings, depending, probably all of them. And yeah, I've done it before, and I was kind of getting started in March of whenever it was.
2 years ago. Okay, any other questions about strategic planning? That's exciting.
Yeah, it is.
IT services.
So a little bit of an update for you. 2 years ago, the Alton SAU outsourced its IT director services. So instead of having an employee as you had in the past, you had a service provider who simply sent in a monthly bill for the hours he was engaged in work for the district. His contract allowed for either party to terminate the relationship with 30 days notice, which he has done. So he's still working for us for the rest of this month. And then March, April, May, and June, he will not be. So the longer term plan will come later. There needs to be a plan for July and beyond, which I'm working on. But for tonight, I just want to talk about an interim plan because the technicians here in the building need somebody to elevate help desk problems to if they need help. And the school needs a little bit of support with Power School, particularly around the end of the trimester, second trimester, and the end of the year. We happen to have people in SAUs 301 and 86 who are qualified to do those things. I can hire them to do that, essentially expanding the roles that they work in for those schools. We did this with Business Services and SAU 86 2 years ago. Some of you witnessed that transaction. What it means is SAU 301 and SAU 86. Watch Heidi, she's about to get really happy. Bill, those two SAUs bill SAU 72 for these services. Amounts not to exceed what I've listed here. I think you get network and help desk support for $1,100 a month for 4 months, plus FICA and NHRS. You get the Power School support we need for $1,000 for the rest of the year, again, plus FICA and NHRS. There's more than enough money in the budget for contracted services, which is what these would be, literally because of this way of doing it where the other SAUs are billing this SAU. And that would get it done. We have the capacity. We have people qualified to do this.
So do we need a motion on that, or is that just a discussion?
I mean, it's up to you. It's really us using the budget, but,
Kind of a
you know,
have
it's a
to.
pretty significant change.
I mean, it's kind of like, we have to do it. I mean, we
Yeah,
don't
Right.
have a
there's that.
choice. So, in our tech committee, we had just started talking about moving forward with putting the work together for a redundant server. And maybe this is a question for Caleb. I mean, is that being put on hold because of this, or because I'm imagine that drastically reduces hands on deck to do that?
I believe it was to be installed this month.
Okay, so before he leaves. Look at Caleb. He's nodding. Okay.
Redundancy is good in IT.
Yeah, I mean, there really shouldn't be any changes in terms of operations and even execution of the current budget. It just,
I mean, that
we
just seemed
should
like
be able to sort of
a
move
particular
forward.
project that was being led by the current IT consultant, and wanted to make sure that was not in danger.
Well, it's something we definitely need.
Right.
And,
We'll make sure it gets done.
So I don't think we need a motion on that.
Okay.
I don't want to set a precedent.
I also didn't want you to find out that we no longer had that contractor working for us and not know anything about it, so here we are.
Thank you. Principals report.
actually, I don't even need it. Mine is pretty much as noted. Two additions. We actually, for the drama production, we have another audition set up because there are more folks that couldn't make it last week for the audition. So it'll be this Thursday. It was initially supposed to be Wednesday, but it's Thursday this week. We're really excited to have Megan Dale from Pittsfield Players that she's going to be running it. Super excited. I already was there one day, and it's going to be awesome. So more news will be coming on that. And then the other thing is our 8th graders today. We did something a little different than previous years where Justin Carloni and Jay Fitzpatrick would come down to our school to talk. They asked if we would go up there. So we brought our 8th graders up to the high school today just to learn about scheduling and all that they're about to start doing. So it was a great day, great morning, I should say. One of the parts that really struck me being there was they had high school students speak to our students at the end, and really, that was my favorite part of the entire thing. I think, our students were, for the most part, there were some that, when they asked how many of you are nervous, and there were kids that actually raised their hand. I was so proud of them for being honest like that. Of course, it's nervous going to the high school. It's a completely, it's different. But the kids did such a nice job talking to our kids today, and I was so impressed and thankful for them. So I wanted to mention it
Awesome.
today.
Thank you. And I'll just mention from your report that you had suicide prevention training.
Yes.
Recently, it seems like that kind of stood out. That's great.
That's a mandatory we do every year. We just did it last week.
All right, facilities report. I don't know if there's anything notable, nothing, pretty normal stuff. Action items, we have a school calendar in front of us. And anticipating a question, Tim, are all three schools work together on this calendar, correct? There's some rumors out there that they don't.
I don't know what the rumors are, but I can tell you what the truth is. The first draft of the school calendar had all 3 schools starting and ending on the same days. There are ultimately bound to be some differences. So the draft in front of you tonight on the table, not the one in your email board, is a little bit different. This one has the first day of school at ACS on Tuesday, September 6th, so it's after Labor Day. It does have a 180-day school day calendar. You've had 178 the last couple of years. But you now have 2 bargaining agreements, not just one, that stipulate 180 days with students. I'm anticipating that you will have 2, not just one. You've agreed to 2. I think this is where the last day is likely to land at both elementary schools on June 20th. The teacher workday on October 7th and the teacher workday on March 20th. Those are teacher workdays at all 3 schools. It doesn't mean that we'll all go to the same place, but it's possible. It certainly means that if we were to hire a speaker or somebody to present on a certain topic that's relevant to all of our schools, that each SAU would pay 1/3 what they would have paid previously to hire that same service, right? And we could do it in the same place. If we don't have those days in common, then we can't do those things. So it's a step in that direction, in the direction of a common calendar. But we do have some unique needs in each school that, as long as that exists, they're going to have to be addressed. So over time, I think you'll see greater and greater conformity. I will tell you out of interest, because I know people watching or listening, and you, in Alton, who have students at the high school and students here, the high school draft calendar starts for students before Labor Day, as it did this year and last year and has in the past. But they've been different, right? This school and the high school have been different. One of the things I've been learning about through this process. So this is just a draft. You've typically in the past approved the calendar in April. So I wanted to share this with you, give you a chance to look it over here. If you have any thoughts or feedback now, give you a chance to look at it. I don't really need you to take action on it unless you really, really want to. It might even be good to wait and see how these conversations go at the other schools.
Yeah, I think the concern among the overlap is even less about siblings. There's a little bit about that, but it's more about teachers whose schedules need to align with their own kids, you know. So I'm wondering, as you were talking, I'm wondering if maybe we could even have prospect students provide babysitting or something, you know, something creative to help with that when we have those overlaps. But I like the first day after Labor Day.
I agree, and I feel like I don't want to focus on the high school calendar tonight. That's a conversation for another night. I just will say that I really don't like when the high school kids go back for one day and then they have 4 days off. I think that that's really awkward, and it disrupts a lot of students who work. The only thing that I wanted to say about the calendar was, and I noticed that we have a open house on September 1st. Is that going to include a pre-K, or are we gonna have a pre-K thing separate? Remember we talked about that, how we were going to,
So
can we,
I see someone who's been here and knows nodding. Because I have no idea what open house has looked like at this school, because I haven't been here for it, and we didn't do it this
It's great
year.
because it's in the evening and it's
Right.
before school starts, which is, I think it really works well.
I was gonna say, she's right, it was a discussion about doing something separate.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, so.
Well, and this year we did a separate
The meet and greets, I mean, I
Yeah,
think the
just-
meet and greets,
just so that it's
are here
on
to
the
stay regardless. They went
calendar.
over really well.
For those families, I
I
just,
think the kindergarten, pre-K were
Yeah.
concerned that they weren't able to get into the building. And I
Right.
think we changed that for them.
right,
so they
and
can
I'm
come
just
in.
to make sure that that is, noted somewhere so that all that information gets out, so.
That's a good reminder, thank you.
And in Gilmington, we used to have the little guys ride the bus, the kindergartners would ride the bus in the summertime in August to kind of get the idea of what it's like to be on a bus. That's another thing to consider. The bus company will allow that. And it
That's cool.
helps the little guys and the parents knowing that they know how to do it when they do it the
Right.
first day of school.
Good idea.
Just something to think
Good
about.
idea.
And the only other thing I want to say about the calendar, and this is my own opinion, I think that January 20th is a really late date. I like to see the kids out, and I'm really.
June 20th?
June 20th, what did I say?
January.
January, yeah, I want them out in January, Darren, you're done.
Mrs.
No.
Pierce, you sound like a teacher. You want to start after Labor Day.
Yeah, I
and
do.
finish early
I
in
do,
June.
because I feel like the kids and the teachers work really hard, and I just feel like that it comes a point when it is time for summer, and I feel like June 20th is really.
Those 2 days.
And
are
this building
really
doesn't
Remember
have
really
air
what
conditioning
The
yet.
calendar says the 16th, as an early release day is the last day.
I handed you a new one.
Oh,
The new one was in the new packet.
So it's this
oh, I got my packets all mixed up.
No, me too. It
Yeah.
says 2:15.
So, and
Yep,
I
it has
understand
today's
that
date
it's
on
a 180 day, and I understand the collective bargaining. And I also am really aware of the fact that we use remote snow days, but, I just, it's my own personal opinion. I feel like I just wanna have,
I agree with Anne, I like counting hours so we can have a shorter year, and
I
I think
agree.
the collective bargaining agreements can be worked out in other ways, hopefully.
The big thing that caught parents off guard last year was the fact that we had February vacation in March. There were a lot of parents that had plans for February vacation that were the traditional New Hampshire, so it wouldn't hurt to notify parents that, again, the governor is the one that asked us to do that, but a lot of parents are pretty upset about that, so it wouldn't hurt to communicate about that
Yeah.
earlier than later.
And to that point, Carol, so absolutely, the state issues a recommended calendar. Now, it's only recommended, it's not required, but here's where it gets a little bit complicated. So we're at Alton Central School, an elementary school, right? But our families send kids to Prospect Mountain High School. Prospect Mountain High School sends students to the Lakes Region Technology Center at Kingswood. So when the Governor Wentworth School District follows the state recommended school calendar
We have to do.
for vacation weeks, it's a little harder. And there are some towns in New Hampshire who said, we don't care what the state's recommendation is, this is when we want our vacations to be, and they're out of sync with the rest of us.
Right.
We're in sync with the state recommendation partially because of that relationship with Governor Wentworth.
And I totally understand, we have to comply, but it would be nice to communicate that sooner than later, because I know some parents had cruise tickets and the whole 9 yards. There are gonna be kids out of school next week that are gonna take their traditional vacation.
Any other notes on the calendar? All right. Thank you. Attorney's fees?
Here's what it is.
Fees are going up? That's the bottom line?
Yep,
Okay.
they don't go
Any
down.
questions?
Never go down.
no, but the non-attorney consultant rates are.
Is higher, yeah.
Your options would be to put out an RFP and talk to some other firms. I'm not recommending that because I work with more than one firm and the fees are similar.
And they've done a great job for us
done a great
through
Yeah,
shared,
no,
shared
it's-
services, a lot of different,
Just interesting that the non-consultant fees are, non-attorney consultant fees are,
They're high, yeah.
We actually use more of those than you might imagine. Not everything we do with them is with an attorney. They have a lot of employees who are not attorneys who we're able to use for various things.
okay. moving on.
Do we need a motion for that?
I don't think so.
It is
do
what
we?
it is.
It's up to you.
It said on
No, it's a
under action.
contracted service. We
Yeah.
don't need a motion
We're
for
gonna
that.
pay
All right.
All right, personnel report. I'll take motions on the, personnel.
I'll make a motion to accept the resignation of Ethan
Feniger.
Feniger, the retirement of Cindy Dorr, and the appointments for the spring athletic department and co-curriculars, also for the spring. Would you like me to name them, or can I lump them?
You don't need to name them.
I'll second.
Just under discussion, I'm noting that there's a hiking club, and that looks new. That's great. That's awesome.
And I'd also like to say thank you for those people who are coaching. It is a thankless job.
Well, and I'd also like to note that Cindy Dorr's been a 30-year employee, and so
Yeah,
we
she's
should
been here.
Yeah.
give her many thanks for
Absolutely.
her
Yeah.
contributions, and I'm assuming at the end of the year we'll be
Mhm.
commending her in some way.
She will be missed. She's absolutely wonderful.
I have a tradition about this that Alton doesn't know about yet, but I believe in throwing a retirement party every year, even if nobody's retiring. And you'll all be invited.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No.
I have one
Passes.
question about replacing the technology integrator. Do we have a plan for that already?
Yep, actually, we've already done it. So what we did is, we took our, one of our help desks, who has a degree in, oh my goodness, what is wrong with me? Sorry.
He has a bachelor's degree.
Yeah,
That's all that
he's
matters.
got a batch, and he was able to shadow, the previous, and has already been doing it this week, so.
So in the labor market this year, it's been impossible. I don't like that word very often, but it really has not been possible to go out and find certified teachers in the middle of this year. We can get an emergency authorization or a letter permission to employ from the credentialing office at the Department of Education for anybody with a bachelor's degree. In this case, we had a help desk employee in IT, so someone who's qualified, who already knows the building, already knows the kids, can step in essentially as a long-term substitute teacher, properly credentialed for that role, at least under an EA, and
Yeah,
we
but
don't miss a beat.
we've just had extra pressure put on our IT department.
Yep.
And extra responsibility put on our IT department. The technology integrator is a very different role. I mean, the technology integrator is working with curriculum, working with teachers, really providing that bridge.
So for the remainder of the year, he's working, to cover the classes, the computer classes that were there, and keeping his help desk responsibilities for the time being.
So we're not going to look for a replacement?
For next
So,
year.
so I talked about interim planning, long-term planning for IT. I'll have both an internal audit and an external audit done by the end of April. And I'm probably going to propose to you at a joint board meeting a shared service approach to IT.
Yeah, I mean, I'm concerned because I know Mr. Feniger had his hands in a lot of different projects, and he did an awful lot for the school, so it's with regret that we accept his resignation, I'm sure. I'm just worried about filling that void, especially where the IT department doesn't have a head.
Tim's right about the labor market right now and the teacher market, and it sounded like something that came up very quickly, that they needed to, he gave me a heads up.
Yeah, but I guess, did
that
we
they
put out
needed
an
to
ad? I
address.
mean, did we try?
And we had a resignation in the middle of the year, which is highly unusual for a teacher.
So my concern with advertising today, middle of February, is if we complete an audit of IT services in all three schools, which is what I'm going to propose, which is why I'll do that at a joint board meeting, in April, and then have some changes. I could have just brought on an employee and then 30, 60, 90 days later say, hey, by the way, this job doesn't exist anymore, it's changing to something else. And I would just not like to do that to somebody. So I'd like to try to get through the next couple of months with the employees we have, understanding that we're gonna send someone from the high school or from Barnstead to help out when necessary, like I already outlined, just to get through the planning period at least, so that we can then start hiring on a hopefully permanent basis.
I'd just like to add, when you're looking for a teacher for a July 1st start date, you've got a much greater pool of candidates. And a tech integrator is a very specialized, high-level position, and difficult to hire for anyway, and in a shortage in New Hampshire. So that's going to give us a much better pool of candidates than.
I mean, I guess I just wonder if that position really should be supported. I mean, if we're bringing in the IT help desk person, if they should be supported by someone on the education side, you know, have somebody who.
They are.
You?
We've actually already set him up with a mentor teacher that he's working closely with.
Okay.
He's not alone,
Okay, thanks.
not by a long shot.
Okay, good.
I would say if you're like most schools, you're also focusing a little more on other subjects than necessarily focusing so much on technology after
Well,
2 years of strong.
we are in a very different place now than we were pre-pandemic. A very different place. I mean, we were thrust into everybody. There wasn't a choice. Everyone was using technology. So we are definitely in a very different place. That's not to negate the need of a tech integrationist. It's just, it's a fact.
So we're at our second public input. Again, we have 3-minute input periods.
Jason English again. So, thank you for allowing the parents to finally make the decision regarding their kids' faces. But I'd like to also make sure that everybody does understand where we are, and that is the fact that the science has not changed. Nothing has changed. People are still dying. And the only thing that's changed is it's an election year. And we really need to make sure that the decision made tonight is not going to be a flip-floppy one, so that after March 8th, the election goes, the local election comes and goes, and then the next thing you know, we're back to, controlling our kids and damaging their mental state. I'm glad that we can start to turn this page towards normalcy. Hopefully we can start focusing on, making sure that this 33% math proficiency and English language arts is not doing much better. These are things that we really need to focus on. These are things that we need to grow. I just want us to make sure that we're doing this stuff for the right reasons and not for political show. These kids are in a very sensitive emotional state right now, and we just need to stop playing head games with them. So thank you for allowing the options, and see you next meeting.
Any other public input?
Sure, I wasn't planning on it, but I will. Alicia O'Rourke again, and just a couple things that I want to, every time I speak, it's like I have 3 minutes, I could speak for 3 hours, as I'm sure all you could. So I try to get out as much as I can, and, there's never enough time. So, but one of the things that I did want to touch on, because I've heard it a bunch of times, is the whole idea that it's not being school transmitted, and it absolutely is, and my oldest son is proof of it. He was vaccinated. We're all vaccinated. Everybody in my house, there's 5 of us. Every single one of us is vaccinated. My husband and I are boosted. My oldest actually didn't get a chance to get boosted because he fell in that category where the boosters for them hadn't come out yet. But he was the one in the house that had the oldest vaccine, if you will, because my 2 youngest ones had their latest one in December. Well, he was at high school. He wore a mask every day, but he was probably one of a handful of kids in the entire school who wore a mask every day, okay? There's only so much you can do. You're inundated when you're surrounded by students. But I can't say definitively he hadn't gone anywhere. He wasn't in any sports. He hadn't done anything. The only place that he had been was at the high school. All of us were tested, none of us had it, he was the only one. Thankfully, as soon as he had a symptom, I quarantined him to his room, none of us managed to get it, we all escaped it. Which kind of brings me to my next point is, believe it or not, there are families out there who haven't gotten COVID. And we haven't gotten COVID because we've been doing the responsible thing. Yeah, does it suck? Quite frankly, it does. There are so many things that our families have been limited from over the course of the last few years, but we're doing it for not just us, but for the betterment of everybody else. People sitting here, I don't know them from a hole in the wall, but I wear a mask to protect them as much as I do myself. So there are families who haven't yet gotten it, believe it or not, but there's also families who have children who aren't able, and yes, of course, some adults, but haven't able to get vaccinated. I have a niece. She was born premature at 23 weeks. She was 1 pound, 0.87 ounces, excuse me. She's not old enough to get a vaccine. My little ones go to school. They get COVID. We bring it to her. I don't know how that's going to work out. My sister almost died. The baby almost died. Those are people that you guys, I feel like, aren't taking into consideration when you sit here and say we've moved the goalpost. Okay, well, but there is no set goalpost. That's the whole idea of this. Everything changes every day because that's the idea. We're in the middle of a pandemic and we have to be able to react. And if it means that we got to push it back, so be it. We have to push it back. We don't sit with a deadline because we say that's the date we have and that's the date we stick with. And I would just want to say, let's call a spade a spade. When people say masks are optional, we say masks are optional because, my last point, because it makes us feel good, right? Warm and fuzzy. Oh, masks are optional. I've heard people say, oh, masks are optional. You know what that means? We're going back to status quo. We're not in the middle of a pandemic anymore. So when you say masks are optional, call a spade, we're going back to status quo. We're doing nothing. We're not, all those mitigation measures and stuff, masks optional, that's what it is. We're going back to what it was in 2019 without recognizing the reality of the situation that we're in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anna Ransom again. I want to say thank you. This is not an easy seat that any of you sit in. It is a thankless job, and it's hours of work that people don't see. So, election year or not, I'm hopeful, optimistic, and I believe that you're all here for the right reasons, and that's to make sure that our school is moving in the right direction. So thank you. I also want to make sure that we're very clear that we're in a pandemic, 2 years in on this. It's a situation that sucks for everyone. But I do think we have to recognize that our teachers, our administration, our board, everyone's doing the best they can with what they have. And I hope that we recognize that with the teachers. I love the idea of a retirement party regardless of whether anyone's retiring or not. The one thing I would ask in all of this is there's obviously a divide in our community. There's a divide in the school. Everyone has a different opinion, and I love that people want to stand up and advocate for their opinion, but I think we have to respect other people's opinions too. I do fear, and I said this at the high school board meeting when it was voted masks optional at the beginning of the year, I fear the bullying that comes as a result of this decision tonight. For the kids whose parents make the decision that they eat in a different room or that they continue to wear masks when maybe their friends or other kids don't. I hope that we back up our teachers and provide them the guidance and support that they need to make sure that that bullying doesn't happen. So that would be my one petition and request. I'm obviously not afraid to speak up, so I'll let you know if I have any of those interactions in my household. But it is a thankless job, election year or not. It's a thankless job, and I appreciate everything you all are doing. And let's hope for the best for all of our kids.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing that, I'll close public input. I don't often respond to public input, but I do want to say that knowing this board and having worked with these folks for the last year, there's not one person here that's thinking about anything other than kids and teachers. Nobody's thinking about an election or nobody's making decisions based on an election. And that's quite offensive when we hear that, and I do want to defend the board members, because everybody here works very, very hard and puts in a lot of time. We have a very respectful board. Those of you who've been around a long time know that it has been pretty combative in the past, and it has been a really great board for the last 4 or 5 years with different members rotating through, and we're in it for the kids and the school and the teachers. So thank you all for your service, even if you're not here next month.
Wow.
One of us will be there.
You had to add that.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm here for 3 years, so my opinions are not
Yeah,
politically based. They just suck at me.
Me neither.
What you do.
Yeah.
Future agenda items, does anybody have anything for the April? We typically don't meet in March. I imagine we'll have something at the high school. Looks like a pretty full docket for April and May.
I have one item I'd like to add, and that's community service options for elementary kids. I've noticed that, a lot of the options to do fundraisers are really concentrated in NHJS. So I'd really like to see some other options for other groups to be formed, so kids can be engaged in community service without being in National Junior Honor Society. I know that Voice in the past has been one of those groups, but they haven't been active this year. When I've asked about that, it had to do with a meeting time, and I'm not really clear. I mean, my understanding of Voice is they're really supposed to be kind of like a student council for Alton Central. And they arrange some of the social events too, so I think we should kind of get Voice back on their feet to provide another option for kids to be involved and engaged.
I'm sure it's been tough with
Mhm.
COVID.
The
Right.
Sure, it's
social
all
events that they
pandemic
would
related.
I know that Voice
arrange
was really
haven't been
strong,
able to happen.
and
Most of it's social, so
Mhm.
you think of COVID, not very
Mhm.
socially friendly, so a lot of what we
Right.
did.
Yeah, but I mean, Voice can be more than the social if they're really supposed to be like a student council voice.
But in reality, I'm sorry, can I answer that?
Yeah.
Sorry, in reality, one of the biggest draws, I believe, for doing something like Voice was the social aspect.
Mhm.
And when that's all away, it's really hard to attract kids to actually do it or want to, or to get out in the, even to get out in the community when we're so, the last 2 years, it has been as separate as possible. I mean, ideally, yes, and I absolutely believe in it, but it's gonna take some time, just like everything else, it's going to take time.
Yeah, well, I
Maybe-
guess,
maybe
let me
something
revise my
like that.
point. Let me go back to the community service part of it, because, we are able to find the time and the resources and the meeting times and the guidance for Natural Junior Honor Society to do those type of activities. So I think we need to provide that to kids who aren't necessarily in that space, who want to join National Honor Society. Because community service is something we promote at the high school, and that's something that really should be fed in from the elementary school also. I also didn't want to forget to mention that on our website, for school board, we've talked in the past about being transparent and having the packets online for the board meeting, and I don't think we've been doing that recently, so I'd really like to see that there again. And also, there's no link on our website to the YouTube channel. It's on the agendas, if you go into the agendas, but I think we probably should really have a link to the YouTube channel in the school board meeting section.
Thank you. What I wanted to mention was I wonder if the Winnie Walk could be held again. And, if things are still calm in May and transmissions are still low, it's an outdoor activity. That's a pretty traditional community
It is,
service
very much.
activity,
Mhm.
yeah. Whole school activity.
Voice
Okay.
is great advisor.
I'll take next meeting date is April 11th, and I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I make the
Oh,
motion.
do we need non-public?
Sure.
We do?
Section K.
Okay.
Non-public under RSA 91-A:32K.
I second.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Yes?
Yes.
Yes.